Eric, are you bringing some powerful stuff on what you do for consultations today?
I will bring everything that I can contribute.
All right. I'm sure the script master has some awesome scripts.
Well, I just know it works for me.
There you go.
Nice to meet you, Delia.
Nice to meet you too.
I'm Eric Nelson. I'm with the Habiger team. I'm their lead buyer specialist.
Okay.
And this can be a little bit of an open forum while we're waiting for everybody to come in too. If there's any questions you have about anything, this is a good time to jump in. One thing I would like to kick off while we're kind of waiting to get our juices flowing and questions, like how is business going? Are you finding business? Are you, like today we're talking about buyer consultations. Are you getting in front of buyers to give consultations? Are you not getting in front of buyers and trying to, or what's really happening out there?
For me personally, getting in front of buyers isn't the problem. Getting them to be able to compete in today's market is the big problem. Because a lot of people think that they want to buy a home and they want to buy a home, but in reality, their situation is very inhibiting to them actually winning multiple offer situations.
Is that because of financial situations, or they're just not listening, or what do you find?
I think right now, a lot of it is due to financial. If you're not, I mean, in the competitive homes that are out there right now, if you're not conventional or cash, you're not being. It's really hard to get an FHA or VA even considered unless you're willing to get crazy on the numbers, and then it still has to appraise. So
right.
It's tough for a lot of buyers right now that don't have the income and the saved money that some buyers do. I think if someone is selling a house right now and then using those proceeds to purchase, it's easier for them.
Yeah.
But if you have a renter that is getting out of a rental, or a college kid, or somebody that's moving out of mom and dad's house and they don't have 50% down, it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so that brings up kind of a little side note, guys. We just did a little open conversation to kind of get things flowing before we jump into the buyer consultation. This is a great time for you to, like, I had you guys pull up your past co-ops from last year, and not necessarily for recruiting or any of that kind of stuff, but to get that list in front of you, to maybe just call them, and like, especially if you're challenged with getting buyers into properties as they're hitting, call these people back and go, hey, I just was thinking of you today, looking at my last sales, and I saw, we co-op last year and it was a good deal. And I was actually just calling to see how your business is going. You got anything coming up that I should be aware of? This market's so tight, looking for buyer stuff, trying to get them into things with multiple offers. And I'm telling you, if you're doing that as part of your business on a regular basis, especially when you're representing buyers, that can pay off for you in getting their offers accepted over somebody else's, or at least letting you know. Like, I'll give you a real example. There was one where a buyer was competing VA for a house, and the agent that had the conventional buyer was actually a jerk, kind of a jerk to everybody. And the listing agent said, if your buyer could go conventional, we'd rather work with you, because they know this other agent was trouble. There's always issues. The inspection was going to be rough, all that stuff. And I'm just throwing an idea out here though, Eric, but that was switching the buyer to conventional, even though he is VA and wanted to go VA, switching to conventional and being approved because it was a clean VA buyer, getting the offer accepted, and then saying, hey, do you mind if he goes ahead and gets a VA appraisal, and let's just see how it comes back. And it all came back fine. The appraiser didn't ask for anything. And so that buyer was able to switch back to convention or to VA. Didn't matter to the seller at that point, but it took the conventional side to win.
Yeah.
So
no,
go ahead.
We've kind of done the same thing with our team, is reaching out to agents for I have a buyer in this area. Do you have anything coming up? And we've done that enough to where randomly we'll get calls from outside agents from other brokerages that say, hey, I have this coming up. Do you have a buyer for it? So we're not only going to them, but they're proactively coming to us, letting us know what they have coming.
Yeah, so guys, this is an important point. We're talking about the buyer consultation here. And when you're going through the financing, once you find out what the buyer is looking for, and if they say VA or even FHA, you want to add probably a conversation inside your consultation now about, as competitive as the market is, you don't want to necessarily say you're not going to get a house if you're VA, but it's going to be very challenging if we're in multiple offer situations to convince a seller that that somebody with financing would be as good as a cash buyer or something like that. You see what I'm saying? Like, you don't say, hey, VA buyers just don't get houses. If I do say that, I would say I hate the fact that VA buyers are not able to win offers. Unfortunately, it's tough to fight with any commit or any financing against a cash offer, especially if they're waiving appraisal requirements and taking the house as is, right? So in the consultation, that's a piece that's going to be added in there during this part of the market, because you don't want to be the blame for them not getting the house. And when that happens and they lose out on a house to a cash buyer, we are the blame. Ultimately, outside the conversation, when they're talking to friends and family and stuff, they're like, yeah, I don't know what really happened in there. You don't know what that conversation looks like on the other side. So it is good. This is a great conversation. I'm glad we kind of talked about it, because that does need to be a piece in your consultation to talk about the financing types. And it might be worth looking into some of those other options while you're going through the process, just to see if you can, use those to get the house. And then we could see if we can switch back to the other one later. You know what I'm saying? Not a bad deal. Anybody else have anything going on with, are you getting in front of enough buyers? Have you tried to do consultations and not locking them up? Are you not getting in front of buyers to even get the consultation, or anything around this topic that you're hoping to get out of today's conversation? And you can just chime in if you have an idea or question or anything to share.
No, I can say, the bulk of my clients are buyers, although I'm trying to get to where I'm having more listings. But I'm always trying to find ways to just have a better presentation. I know when I first was doing buyer consultations, I kind of found, just by seeing when I go through my transaction, where am I experiencing the most difficulty, or where my clients are most anxious, I found that it was inspections. And then I realized I was not explaining the inspection negotiation process well during my buyer's consultation. So when it came up, it was just all these issues kept coming up. And so I find with every time I kind of revamp my consultation, I can see another area in the process where it's like, oh, if I would have mentioned this during the consultation, this would be a lot smoother. So I'm always looking for ways just to get better insight in how I'm communicating the transaction.
Yeah, and this is a conversation, guys. We'll go through all the slides and we'll talk about the different things that are in there. But right now, what part did you add in to help alleviate that or prepare them for the inspection part?
The number one thing, I've also found I was giving way too much information, which probably didn't help, because I think it caused some anxiety. So I kind of shortened it down to just how the inspection negotiation process works. Like, we'll do earnest money, we'll order inspections. After inspections are done, we'll review them together, and kind of what that time frame is for us to give a response. And then I just really communicate to them what the aggregate cost is, because in our contract, we have aggregate costs. And a lot of buyers, they just want to know, how much responsibility am I going to have to take on? And so I just always tell them, hey, no house is perfect. It doesn't matter if it was just remodeled. No house is perfect. And there's a certain amount of responsibilities that as a buyer, you're going to take on, because you're understanding that it's a house built by imperfect people, imperfect materials, and it goes through all varying levels of the Kansas weather. And so I kind of just explain it in that context, because I found when I got way too in the weeds, I think it scared them. So a lot of trial and error.
No, that's an awesome share, and I love that summary for it. So that's great. All right, anybody else have anything to add on that part?
I think for me, when you're talking about the buyer's consultation and getting in front of the buyer and having a consultation, one of the things that we have to remember right now is that we don't ask to have them come in and do the consultation, they're not going to do it. So, every phone call I make, every meeting I have is designed to have that appointment, to set that appointment, not just have a conversation.
Yep. So that brings us to set the appointment. And a real easy way, this is just a one-line script that can get them to see the value of coming in. And what you're kind of hearing everybody talk about, if there's value to come into the office first for the consultation, they'll come in. It's just like, anything that you pay for, when we talk about all the different commissions and stuff, you're going to pay a lot more for a Tesla because of what Tesla's built in the value of the Tesla than you will just go buy a $30,000 car or $40,000 car, which is still going to be a really nice car, right? But it's all the other stuff that came along with it, built value. And a value to a buyer, and you guys tell me if you have something else you say along this line, really, it's as simple as saying, if we can get together for 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to show you the process and how to take advantage of the current market conditions. There's something about that phrase that it works on sellers, buyers, everybody. What I'm going to share with you is how to take advantage of the current market conditions so that you can, and then whatever their reason was, to buy a new, so you can not pay too much for your first home, because they might have been talking about, we're concerned about paying too much for the house because of the competing market. So if we can get together for 15, 20 minutes and I'll show you how to take advantage of the current market conditions so you don't pay too much for a home, that's tied to what they were talking about in the initial, capturing their information. Do you guys have anything to add? Anyone have anything to add to that? Or how you think you would add value if you were to get them in?
COVID really helped me a lot, because there for a while, they didn't want anyone showing homes unless they were pre-approved. And so I still tell people hey, in this, which is true, in any market, you need to be pre-approved, but it really helped me be more confident in setting the appointment. And so now when I get, a lot of times what buyers call, there are a lot of them are first-time home buyers, at least my calls are. And so when they're like, hey, we're interested in buying, we want to know what's a process. I was like, okay, the first step is, I pre-qualify them, get information. And then I tell them, okay, first step is getting pre-approved. After you get pre-approved, then we'll come in and do the buyer's consultation and go over everything in the market and make sure you're ready, because you can still buy a home in this market. The number one thing is just being prepared. And I have a very high close rate with appointments. If I get them on the phone, I can usually get them an appointment, and I haven't had any pushback, especially because of COVID, even with people that maybe be our second time buyer. I just say, hey, right now you really have to be pre-approved. And then after that, let's do the consultation and then look at homes. And I haven't had too many issues, but I think it's also the nature of the market has helped me with that quite a bit.
Well, and your confidence in it, that that, and that is important, because if you take them out and show them in competing bids and you haven't got approved, we really are wasting our time and showing them too many houses and they're missing out, right?
And I don't know if this was on bold. And Eric, maybe you'll remember this, but I remember somebody saying, you're the expert. And so when you give them your expertise, people usually aren't going to question you if you say it confidently. And I don't remember if that was a bold thing or where I heard that from, but I noticed that when I kind of say, no, this is the process, I don't get as much, if any, pushback.
Yeah, for sure. The setting ourselves as the professionals, as the experts in the field, whether you're doing a listing or a buying presentation, we are the professionals. I'm not going to go to my dentist for suggestions on a cardiac problem. They need to buy a house, sell a house, we're the people they need to be in front of.
That is all great stuff. Thank you guys for sharing that. All right. So on setting the appointment, and I'm going to give some suggestions too. If you're newer and you haven't had many, if any, actual consultations yet, you just got some great tips. COVID, getting pre-approved in this market, it's not even you. It's the market is really demanding more that you get these pre-approvals in place before you even go look at a house. The sellers are just whatever. You can probably just leave it at that. So what I'm going to say here again is something that I've said in the past. And if you're newer and haven't had any consultations, I'm going to give you a suggestion on how you can start getting some. Because the first part is, as we go through this stuff, this is actually a lot of content, and Command has the consultation, like you can follow a presentation consultation kind of in there, and it asks questions, and it's a whole book. It can actually just be your whole consultation. So don't get caught up into what do I say at the consultation. Let's first get you into the consultation, which comes back to the ultimate thing, getting them captured, getting them in your system so that you can cultivate them into an appointment. And I'll just kind of remind you all real quick that as you're working to get with buyers, that only 1% of anyone you're talking to is moving right now. So if you're not getting enough consultations, or you don't feel like you've got enough buyers, you're trying to find more buyers for your business, understand the next 100 people you talk to, 98 of them are not moving right now. Even if they're an internet lead and they're leading in, Demetrius nailed it. If you don't get them on the phone, I mean, until you get them on the phone, it's hard to even capture them to get them into the system as whether they're a lead or not. But once you get them on the phone, you can build that, get that two-way conversation going. Then you can capture them and put them in there and actually cultivate them. But internet leads, I don't know if you guys are seeing this or not, how many internet leads come in, if you're getting a lot of internet leads, to actually the ones that you get on the phone and actually meet with. I'm pretty sure it's still around 1 or 2% are converting. And if you get them on the phone, you're more likely to get them in. Does anybody have anything to share on the part of getting them in, cultivating them so you can get them in for the appointment? Or how many? Go ahead.
That we get in, there's probably a 15-to-1 ratio of even getting them to answer the phone. And then, you know, probably a 4-to-1 of having them actually have a conversation with you. The 1 out of 15 may just hang up as soon as you introduce yourself. So what I found with what you're talking about with, you know, getting them on the phone is, if you don't set the appointment, at least in my experience, if you don't set the appointment in the first 2 conversations you have with them, then you kind of train them to be able to answer questions over the phone or through text. So one of the classic lines I use is, you know, it's a great question. I would love to take the time to answer that for you. Let's meet up 4 o'clock tomorrow, and I can answer all your questions at that point. You know, don't spend an hour with them on the phone, because then every time you call them, they're going to take an hour of your time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anyone else? So one of the things I was going to say is, if you don't have enough buyers coming in to get the consultation appointment, and we're covering the material now, so ideally you want to get back into this material as soon as possible, like from today forward, like in the next couple days. If you can go through this material while it's fresh, especially before what is today, Wednesday, Friday, when we cover the next topic. If you could go do a consultation this afternoon and one tomorrow, then it's going to get set up more to where you are going to be more confident doing it with a real buyer when the real buyer comes through. And the way to do that just goes back to your master list, and you're adding your people in your database that are on your Facebook friends list and in your phone. These are the people that you can call. Like when you connect with somebody, actually, let me ask this a different way. How many of you, and just raise your little hand if you have somebody in your sphere of influence that they're excited about your real estate career, and when you see them, they're always like, how's real estate going? And they're anxious to hear what's going on. Does everybody have that person, right? I'm not seeing everybody raise their hands, and you may or may not be in front of a computer. I don't know. Yeah, there's somebody in our sphere that's excited about our real estate business. So if you're connected with them, if you've been working on this list every day, and or that person that you're thinking of right now, if you could call them and say, hey, I just went over this whole process for just covering like the process of buying a home. Now, this person's probably not moving right now, or they would have called you, but they're excited about your career. And you're like, I just went through this process on just explaining the process of buying a home and all that stuff. And I would love it if I could get with you and you could just let me know what you think, you know, take you through the process. Let me know what questions I didn't add or take care of, what questions you would have, what you think as somebody who's not even moving right now, to make sure that I covered everything, right? They're your guinea pig. Like, you're not going to say they're your guinea pig, but you want to take them through the process and get their opinion on what you talked about, and is there anything that they thought you should have added, because now they're playing real estate with you. Now, the real thing is, if you really connected with 5 people a day and you're going through this every day and you're really working your list and you're staying in touch with people, you could have somebody that you added into command a month ago, and now they've heard from you at week 4, right? And they're week 8 calls coming up. You can actually use that as part of your topic. And if you feel comfortable enough that you're connected enough that they would meet with you. So if you can do that with 2 or 3 people right after a session and take them through the seller consultation, obviously you're not going to take the same person every 2 days through whatever we talked about in Ignite. But if you have enough people that you're connecting with and you get a handful of people that are excited, you can bounce those things off of them and get in front of them and do a consultation while it's fresh. So that's why I really wanted to help you get out of this page to get to the appointment. Only 1 out of 100 is probably buying right now. Even most internet leads that are coming in, they might be 3 or 4 months out from actually buying, because I know you ask qualifying questions, most of you do when you get an internet lead. However, if you get an internet lead, how many times they say, well, we're just starting the process, or we're not pre-approved yet? Because one of the first questions we ask is, are you pre-approved? And I mean, out of the 15 internet buyers you get, how many of them are approved? So that's what I'm trying to get at, right? Not many. So we're finding that the internet buyers, even they're just starting the process. And just kind of remember, I think I probably said this in another class, that you're pulling them off from going to a competitor or somebody else's website. You're just happen to grab them off and have better scripts because you got them on the phone and you asked the right questions, that you're pulling them off the market so nobody else can have them. But they're still probably 2, 3, 4 months out. By the time they get their stuff together to get pre-approved and all that other stuff, they might be a couple of months out yet. So most internet buyers are not like actively ready to write an offer that day. It's just not the case. So getting everyone captured and getting those opportunities to give that consultation. Anybody have any questions or anything to add on any of that? Okay. And again, in Ignite, there's a lot of role modeling and there's scripts on setting the appointment. If you haven't downloaded it yet, you got the Element script book. Trying to get it to focus here. You got the Element script book that has the different scripts for during the consultation. It's got the seller consultation scripts in there and everything. In this hour session, we're not really role playing. You know, I know, Eric, do you do your class pretty regularly as far as scripts and stuff?
Yes, we have a class every Monday and Friday from 11 to 12 covering scripts.
2 days a week, 2 hours a week of scripting and role playing and all that stuff. And I know you guys even get into conversations around it too. So it brings it to real life, right?
Yeah, we talk about on Mondays, generally review of what challenge you had over the weekend and what your calls you're going to make that week to kind of front load those scripts. And then Friday, once again, review your week and front load any open houses and whatever you're doing over the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll remind you again, one thing that I suggested probably a couple times throughout this Ignite session, and we're like now on what this is our 14th meeting since we started Ignite, to have an objection, like a little pocket notebook, the little flip kind, and just have an objection book of some sort where if you don't get the appointment or somebody doesn't come in and meet with you for a consultation, write down what was the last thing that they said that got out and say, okay, well, I'll follow back up then. Whatever they said before that was an objection and we didn't have the right script to go ahead and try and close that deal or to get them in. So go back and find 3 things that you could have said to that objection that would have closed the deal a little quicker. And that's for anybody. I mean, I did that. I recorded calls. I recorded every conversation for probably a couple of years. And then I would document the objections, and I would go back and find scripts that I could have used, at least 2 or 3 that you could use. Now, during the appointment, I threw in a couple of slides. This probably, well, it is in your book, but it's like when you're going through that appointment and setting the appointment, I mean, really the consultation is just an overview. I think, Demetrius, you kind of even threw an example out there, like getting pre-approved, and then you're gonna, go drive by the properties. And once we find a property, we're gonna write an offer, get the earnest money. The consultation is just walking through the process. And earlier when I said, show you how to take advantage of the current market conditions, it is to show them this stuff, that they're taking advantage of the current market conditions by getting pre-approved, right? They're taking advantage of the current market conditions, knowing that when they do the inspection, it might be just for your own knowledge at this point, and you're going to have to decide if you want to cancel a contract. So you get to talk about a few different things, but it's just going through the process. And the other thing that we're really setting up here when you're setting up the appointment is to show the value of having someone represent them. And I'll give you my tip, and then I'll kind of open it up if you guys want to share your conversations on how you're building value, so that when it comes down to the buyer consultation or the buyer agency agreement, I'm looking for the setup conversation that's going to make that go smoother. For example, the one thing is when you're building the value of having somebody represent you, it's, when you have somebody looking out for your best interest, and I'm going to suggest try not to use as much real estate lingo as you might, or pay attention to yourself talking. And if you say we got a buyer's agency agreement, that's real estate lingo, or to sign the contract, or to, even represent is kind of a word that they're not going to necessarily always know what that means, but it's a word we use all the time because we represent people with a buyer rep agreement. But really what it comes down to is, if you're talking in basic lingo, I'm looking out for your best interest, as if you were my mom or my brother. And that sometimes is what that explanation there really explains what a buyer's agency agreement does for them. But I want to open it up to you guys, if there's anything you're doing in your conversation or the way you're saying things to set up for that, to bring that value. And that's anybody listening. Anything stand out that you guys might say or do to build up the value to it? Or are you just kind of ripping through it and then you ask them to sign it and they sign it?
I mean, personally, I consider myself more of a consultant and an advocate than I do an agent or a representative. So, I'm here to help you and educate you and give you all the information you're going to need to make the most educated decision that you can, and help you navigate through the questions that may come up along the way.
So as a consultative approach who's giving you all the information, you really can only legally do that with the buyer agency, right?
Right.
Okay.
That's why I sign them generally every time right when I sit down with them the first time.
Yep, to give you all the information. So guys, if it came down to it towards the end and they're like, well, we want to think twice about maybe signing anything, I'm sure Eric's coming back around. Now, just remember the difference is telling you everything that I can tell you, to give you all the information, versus giving you the information you ask for, right?
Correct. Yeah, the transaction broker versus the designated exclusive agent.
Demetrius, anything to add on that?
Yeah, so my approach to it, and I'm like Eric, I kind of go from I'm here to be a resource, but I really want you to make the decisions because ultimately you have to live with the house. My job is to give you every piece of information you need to be informed about the decisions you make, but I layer it with a lot of value. So when I'm asking them questions, I tell them like, hey, even if for whatever reason, you get with the lenders, you're not able to get pre-approved, I'm going to follow back up with you because I want to get you with whatever resources you need to be ready. So I really add so much value. and come from contribution. Like, even if they're like, hey, I'm new to the area, we're looking for daycares. Like, I'll even say, hey, I looked in this community, I looked to see if there were some daycares around, because I'm trying to get an idea of what they need before we even get together. So that initial conversation, I'm asking them a lot of questions. But when it comes down to the consultation, one of the things that I started doing was I tell them that, hey, this buyer's consultation is an interview. You're interviewing me to make sure I'm the right agent for you, but I'm also going to make sure that you're the right client for me, because I want this process to be as peaceful as possible. And if you're not 100% comfortable with me representing you, it's not going to work for either one of us. So we're going to go through this. You have more than enough, interrupt me, ask me questions, because I want you to know that you want to work with me, and I'm going to do the same with you. Because I had ran into some situations where I got clients, but I don't feel like they respected me professionally, and I really didn't set good boundaries. I just had some horrible experiences. And so I find that when I lead with that, they respect me more as a professional, but by the time I get to the agreement, they're like, no, I want to sign it. I actually think it's more of a fear of rejection. But then I just paraphrase like the transaction broker, because I don't really think they really know the difference. I just tell them, mainly if it's a transaction broker, I cannot give you advice. I'm just a facilitator. I'm writing down whatever you want me to write. A buyer's consultation, I'm exclusively representing your interests only. But by then they're signing. But I think it's because I'm leading with that, hey, we're interviewing each other.
Awesome. So like, just to check in, so everybody in the session, this is open to everyone, and you guys have shared some great stuff. Is there anybody else share anything that you may have picked up so far that maybe you were missing in consultations before, or that you're seeing, oh my gosh, that needs to be, I need to make sure I cover it that way? And or anything that you may have been challenged with that now you see a way that you can maybe plug that hole to get them to come in for the consultation or to sign the buyer agency? Anybody else getting anything? If you're in a position where you can unmute and share. All right, or in the chat box, just type in your any ahas you might have picked up so far that you're going to keep in there. Okay. All right. Yeah. And so during that, you're really, when you're looking out for their best interest in the consultative approach that Eric was talking about, and being able to give them all the information, these are the things that are in the buyer consultation that you're kind of doing as an overview to make sure they know there's a lot of things, their favorite home search and saving them in collections, scheduling the home tours and getting in with the pre-approval, finding their dream home. And I know one of the things that I even talk about under the consultation is like, when you're going through the part about, what is your dream home? I'll sometimes set up 2 searches, and one's their dream home, the ideal search, perfect everything. However, you've got to open it up in this market and make sure they know that you might be sending them more. Like in an automated MLS search, this is what I'm trying to get at. In an automated MLS search, you have to open it up or you're not going to find anything. You have to go a little bit higher than their price range. You might have to take it from 2 full baths to 1.5 or more baths, right? And just let them know up front that I'm going to send you some properties that are not what you're looking for, but that's in your general search so that you can see more of what's coming on the market. And if it's just not going to work, just ignore it. Just delete the email. It doesn't cost anything to delete an email. What I don't want to do is there's something that hits the market that's got 6 of the 10 things you'd like to have in a home, but it's really the perfect lot and it's beautiful condition, right? But it has 6 of the 10 things you want. If I did the search for 10 out of 10, you're not gonna find as many homes. But I will I'll set up a perfect house, and that one says perfect home. Drive by this today is the subject line in the email, because that has everything they really wanted matched up. And if that one hits the market, I want it to be separate from their big emails that they're getting. But I mean, especially like offering and negotiating terms, reviewing the contract terms, negotiating the purchase price. I mean, all that stuff is that representation side of things. So that's the stuff that you can bring. So preparing the buyer consultation, this is where we get into the command stuff. And you all have Carol at your disposal. Like, you can literally text Carol, call Carol. She knows command inside and out. She's been through all the consultations that are in there. Everything's in there. And I don't know, Eric, Demetrius, or anybody else, if you have gone in and looked at the consultations and creating your presentation, are you using anything out of the command templates? I mean, if you are, share what you have found and what you're putting together for that.
I like to keep my documents a little bit more abbreviated, because for me, I get off track very easily, especially if I'm super, because I still sometimes get nervous during consultations. So I just find I personally perform better if there's not as much paper. But there, a part of the consultation is just a step-by-step of the entire process. And I just tell them, hey, keep this with you so you can go back and review it after we speak. And then there's a list of to-dos and not to-dos with the lender. And those are the main two things from the consultation that I do use. Because if there's too much paper, then I get nervous and I stumble over myself. So
yeah, well, and that is a good point, because there's so much content in command that you really do, like, it's setting aside an hour just to go through it. But really, especially if you're new, just grab the 2 or 3 things that you could actually feel comfortable talking on, and don't worry about the 10 other things you might not know yet, because all you have to do is really cover a few things. And I love that you said abbreviate, because they're going to bring up whatever questions they have. And sometimes what I see happen is there's so much information that it turns into like we're reading. I mean, it's like you're just reading out of the book, and everything's going over their head anyway, because they haven't bought a house for 5 to 10 years, or they're first-time home buyers, and they don't even know most of the stuff you're saying anyway. So it's to really highlight the things that you know you can talk about, and they'll bring up any questions, and you've got the rest of the stuff there to maybe go answer that question through something else. So it is going through it, but you don't have to cover it all. In fact, I one of the biggest tips I heard and that I coach to forever is just pick the 2 or 3 things that are most important in this, and that's what you're going to talk about. And the other stuff is there for support. Eric, you got anything to add on what you used for the actual presentation or what you guys have created?
Yeah, the presentation that we have was basically created by Diana Kokoska back in the day, and it follows what she has done over the years. Like you had just mentioned, one of the first questions I ask is, what questions do you have before I get started? So that I know, as I'm going through our flow chart and all the information, I know what areas I need to stop and expound on more than other areas. So if they're not concerned about inspections and all that kind of stuff after the fact, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes explaining them. But if that's their main concern, I'll take as much time as they need on that area, and I can drop off information in other areas. So, but like she said, also, we have a sheet about what we call the 10 commandments of lending, of what not to do with your finances while you're trying to get a home loan, stuff like that is valuable to anybody. So, but I think ours is pretty much designed around what's on command now. But I haven't been through command to cross-reference it.
Yeah, well, and so you'll find a lot of the stuff in like Sean's presentation probably in command somewhere, because we talked about it for so long, and it really is a good format to follow. Sean Kokoska and Diana, that's her son. He used to talk about that forever, just so you know where it is. And I know we're not really like a command class, but I want you to know where it is. When you go into command, when you get to templates, I just kind of show you down the side. It's got all the different tabs. It doesn't show everything on here, but like the listing presentations, the buyer consultations, everything's in there. So when you click on buyer, you can get to buyer presentations, and that will show you all the different, well, I mean, it's really a lot of the same dang content. They just change it up on the look of it, so you can pick a look that you like. But when you go through that material, it has the instruction page. It talks about neighborhoods. It talks about mortgage. It talks about all the different things that are in there. And anytime you're setting something up, put yourself in first. Like if there was anything automated with the buyer part of the process, I would put myself in command first. I know like the intake form is it's one of the templates that you can download with your Ignite stuff. And I just use the blue for buyer. Oh yeah, I forgot I had a sample of one in here. Printed one out. the blue for buyer, where I capture their information, and you can kind of see some real chicken scratch notes here. That the blue form is really just when somebody calls and say, hey, so-and-so told me to give you a call, or it's an internet lead that I get on the phone. So I don't have to think. It's like, here's the contact information to get their address, get their phone number, get their email last. Actually, if you'll see, it's actually, I'm getting their name, their address, and their email. The email is actually last. And after I get their contact information, then I start going into, well, tell me a little bit about your situation. What are you looking for? And this is the pre-call before you're getting them in for the consultation. If you can get them in for the consultation, haven't gotten this, you can also do this at the consultation. But it's really just getting all the information about what their perfect home looks like, so that when you come to this section in the guide where you're talking about the table of contents and you're talking about their dream home, their preferences, tell me about the neighborhood. There's the buying 101, which is the process. There's just a lot of information here, but the dream home would trigger you to talk about the conversation of, now dream homes, what that means in this market is you get 6 out of the 10 things that you want in a house, right? Or when you're talking about the neighborhood and the searches, when we're talking about building their profile and setting a search up to make sure that you get the properties that you're looking for the minute they hit the market, we're setting the stage. And I know Eric probably has this slide in his, where it says we typically only show somebody 3 to 5 homes and they buy one. If I show you more than that, I probably haven't done my job. Would that be right?
Yeah, exactly right. We use 5 to 7, but yeah.
Yeah. So, and 5 to 7 is probably even a little more realistic, because 3 of them are sold by the time you can even get them over to there to see it. Right.
Very
So when you're going through this, like I said, this is a lot of detailed information, and I hope that you're kind of hearing what Demetrius even said. It's about summarizing and shortening this up. This might be more of the thing that you send home with them. However, you're looking for those triggers and setting them up for a good experience. Like for this, your wish list home. So you might have a list of 10 things that you want. I know I've said this a couple of times, but if you find a house with 6 of those 10 things, this is the market. And guys, I'm telling you, just saying that, those words leaving your mouth with the buyer sitting there, could be the biggest difference between them really writing an offer on one that they kind of like versus we're going to wait for the next one. Because then if they keep waiting, now they're frustrated, they're missing out. And then if they start ghosting you because they haven't found anything and they keep missing out on them because they're always sold, it could have been just that one thing that you might have said. And that's why we have these, to find out what you guys are saying, to set up so that you don't lose them and so they don't get frustrated and get ghosted by them. Is there anything else, like as you're going through the process, when you're explaining all this stuff and how the process works, that stands out that you feel is a big piece of them not blaming you when they lose houses or ghosting you thinking they're just missing out on houses?
When I first started doing buyer's consultations, I wasn't sure of how I should do it. I actually used that table of contents, although it's the one from Bold, that actually tells you everything you need to do during the consultation. So even if you don't use the pages, that's literally all the conversation points that you need to hit. So if like someone's a new agent and they're like, I don't even know what the flow is, just hit on every single one of these points and you'll get all the information. It's basically your buyer's consultation, even if you don't use the actual pages.
I love that you just shared that, guys. Your first consultation, all you need is those bullets and talk about what you know about those things. The book still got it all in there. You wouldn't even have to flip through the pages, is what I heard you say, right?
Yep. And that's what I did with my first few consultations, because I was like, I don't even know where to start. And then another thing I just recently learned, because I sit on the I can't even think of what the diversity task force for Keller Williams. Another issue that's coming up, the reason why this system is so important is because people are unknowingly or knowingly committing fair housing violations. And so the more systemized your process is, and the more you say the same thing to everybody and you have it written down, if someone says, hey, they treated me unfairly, you can say, no, this is my process, and show people that this is what I do and say with everybody. And I just literally learned that at the Color Real Estate virtual session they just did last week.
Yeah, anything particular, Eric, that you think like that stands out that you say that they won't come back and blame you for missing out on houses or get tired or frustrated and ghost you?
Yeah, for me, it's in the consultation. I'll explain that, when we do a showing, before we leave that house, I'm going to ask you the same question every time. I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate this house? With 1 being, why are we still standing here? 10 being, I'll pay them twice what they want cash. And if you're anywhere in a 7 range, then we need to seriously consider that home, because a 10 doesn't exist. And if it does exist, there's going to be 20 other people that are going to be going after the same home.
When you're talking with, oh, I'm sorry, can I ask him a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Eric, when you're having that conversation in your consultation, do you tell them like, hey, I just want you to know, like, every time we view a house, I'm gonna have you rate it and this, and kind of explain that to them?
Every time, yeah. Every consultation, and in every house that we're in, I do the same thing.
Yeah, that's really, really good. I'm gonna take that, because I have a client who, she'll say, well, it's worth seeing it. And now I'm kind of getting the gist that we're seeing houses she's not interested, because she just, I think, has like fear of missing out. Like, she just wants to see the house because we've gone through so many at this point. So I think I'm definitely gonna take that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and if part of your process is you always drive by the house first, whenever you get that buyer that's turning into that, the first question we say is, have you driven by it yet? Right? Because even that person, you're still showing them houses and they're like, oh my gosh, this neighborhood. And it could have just saved. You never want to say it so that you can save time. It's actually saving them time, because realistically, what could be happening with Delmetris's buyer right now, she's piling so much crap in her head that she can't even process when she's in the right house, right? So the real purpose of making them drive by the property first is that they're only looking for the ones that really would make the list. And you can even say, even if you're not sure about the neighborhood, but if it were the perfect house inside and you could live with the area, I want you to keep that one on the list. So it's not sounding like you're trying to talk them out of seeing houses, even though we probably do need to talk, like that buyer probably needs to be talked out of seeing a couple of these houses, because they're just adding in too much. The other cool thing, and this isn't so much in this market, but this one works really well along the lines of the 1 to 10, is that today we're going to go look, if you get an out-of-town buyer and you're looking at 5 houses, for example. Now, today we're going to look at 5 houses. You can only keep 3. There's no reason to have 5 favorite houses. So at every single house, I'm going to ask you if this one is one of your top 3 for the day. Now, obviously, you get a free pass on the first 3, because you can have all 3 of those as your favorites. But once we go to that 4th one, you're going to be giving me one of the sheets back. You're not going to be able, that one's not staying in your list. So that then you're getting them to cut it down to narrowing it down to 2 or 3 that they really like to make that decision to make an offer. Those are all things that we figured out, that if they keep too much stuff, then they're just confused, right?
Can I add something to that real quick, Brad?
Absolutely.
One of the permissions that I get from all of my buyers as well is, do I have the right to veto you seeing a house? So as we set up our searches and all that, every one of my buyers also randomly will send me a Zillow address or a realtor address that they saw and said, hey, what do you think about this one? Or I want to see this one. And I get their permission to basically tell them why, or point out to them why that isn't going to fit what they told me they wanted. And, they said they wanted a separate dining room or formal dining room. Well, this one doesn't have that. Are you willing to bypass that and look past that to consider the rest of the home, type of thing? So saving yourself the time of qualifying a house with them before taking the time of setting up the appointment, driving out there to have them walk in and say, yeah, you were right. This really isn't the right one.
So if you're fairly new in real estate, what you're going to find is you might not be experienced enough to listen or ask all the questions that you need to. As you show more and more houses, you'll start to pick up on this. In fact, you'll get so good at it, you can actually, and you guys tell me if this isn't the case, right? I can look at the picture of a master bedroom and go, that wouldn't even fit a queen bed in it, right? And they have a king, or they have a big bed, they have the extra dresser and all that stuff. And it's just what Eric said. If you can notice that from the picture, even though it looks wide angle, I mean, you can see that the walls are right next to the end tables of the bed, right? So that is where you can say, now, could you live with a smaller bed? There's no way we can live with a smaller bedroom. That bedroom is 12 by 10. Oh, there's no way that would work. Well, that's the only bedroom in there it's 12 by 10. And that is eliminating, so that you're showing them less and coming back to not confusing them by just showing them, because you're excited about having a buyer that you're out showing houses to. Actually, I'm going to pause right there. There is an okay time to show houses, and it is when you're new and when the buyer is realizing that if I show you houses that you're not interested in, I mean, if they're a decorator and they love that stuff and you're in the learning stage of your real estate career, those two factors could go together to go ahead and show them 20 houses. That's not going to be the case most of the time. And most of the time, you're going to not want to confuse them if they're a real buyer. So there is some difference in like learning the market and sacrificing showing them 20 houses so that you can learn, and they just love decorating ideas. So just know the difference there. I don't know. Hopefully that didn't confuse you guys. Because
No, that really, no, that helped. One of the things when I was a newer agent, and I learned this from Bold, is even if you don't have a client to show, go on ahead and preview homes. Even in this market, you can preview a home, and that'll help with the learning curve of kind of like, if you know, most homes in College Hill have stone basements, they're built in the 1920s. Well, if you have a client that says they want to finish a basement or have the ability to finish a basement, then you know, hey, this house in College Hill probably isn't going to work. But you'll know that as you preview your home. So that's another way to cut down on that learning curve.
If you're fairly new, I mean, it would almost be worth previewing every home that hits the market. If you just went out 1 or 2 days a week, because you figure if you did Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for example, and anything new that came on the market, you're going to go view it. It can't be more than, I mean, what do we have, like 60 or 80 homes total on the market right now? So there's no more than probably a few coming up every week. Can you imagine if you're a buyer's agent and you're talking to buyers and you say, I have been in every single house, I have personally been inside every single house that's on the market right now. I mean, that already demonstrates your expertise, according to this slide right here, just knowing the neighborhoods and knowing what's on the market and how long they're lasting. And especially when you have time, if you're newer, I mean, that would be the best thing you could do with your time, is view every single home the minute it hits the market. Also layering in there, look at the pictures and look at the description and get there and see what it really is, so that you can start translating what it really looks like, what an agent's portraying, and what the house really looked like, so you can bring that expertise.
And
We already, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
And on what Brad just said is, if you have another agent that is willing to go with you, you can practice showing homes to each other and not have to practice on the client.
Yep. So guys, when you're going through this process and you're just saying, here's how the process works, and here's all the disclosures and all that other stuff, getting that buyer agency signed. This was actually the value proposition too. So as you're building up to getting the buyer agency signed, you're going through the process, you're explaining that other one was about Keller Mortgage, letting them know that the option's available. But if you go back to what your value proposition was, and you can highlight those 3 things that you do for people that your competition doesn't say, it's setting them up to get to this point where you are actually asking for the buyer consultation or the buyer agreement to be signed. So when it comes to the buyer representation, and I'll ask you guys, I'll throw one in and then you guys give what you do to get to that point. I just always went with the simplest thing to say, like, so can you see how it would be a benefit to have someone looking out for your best interest as you go through this process? And it's almost like a dumb yes question, because like they don't know there's an agency coming that they need to sign necessarily. First time home buyers don't really know all this stuff, but can you see how it'd be a benefit to have somebody looking out for your best interest? If they say yes, I usually just slide the form over and go, well, this form allows me to do that for you. And that's what I do. And then I hand them the pen, right? But what do you guys, is there anything specific that you do at that agreement time that you do to get it signed?
I like to use humor sometimes, like, well, so there's two different things. I kind of go like, I kind of tell them what's going to happen next. So we do introductions, get connected. Hey, next, let's talk about your dream home. So go through there. One of the things I find is leading with those two things make people very comfortable because they get really excited dreaming about the home they want. And then after that, I go into the buying process, things with the transaction. And then sometimes when I close, depending upon the personality, I joke and say, now these forms, here's the site, here's the affiliated. But the buyer's consultation makes us Facebook official. So when you sign, we're officially working together, but it depends on the personality. But I try to make it just not always so serious, but if you just say even, okay, next we're going to go over all the documentations that make, make us official. That means I'm officially your realtor and you're officially my client. And just kind of lead them through. Those are two different ways that I go about it.
Yep. Anything to add to that, Eric, or anyone else too? If you've gotten one signed, was there anything that you said to get it done?
Yeah, it's kind of like what you touched on before is, this allows me to do my job. It allows me to help you to the full extent that I can. Without this, my hands are tied. I'm handcuffed to the information that I can give you legally. So there's no risk to it. There's no long-term obligation to it. All it is agreeing that I'm gonna work with you and you're gonna work with me, and we're gonna find you your home with the least amount of hassles and save you the most amount of money.
And another one too that I've heard a lot that makes sense is, before we even go see the house, we do have to let them know how we're representing, how we're working together, because they may give me information that I can or can't tell you.
Brad, I have a question for you. Do you work with clients that you don't have an agreement signed with? Like, let's say you go through a consultation and they say, well, I don't know that I want to sign this or whatever, or they just say, hey, I don't want to sign anything. You realtors are always trying to, is there ever a time that you say like, okay, well, I don't work with people unless we have a consultation signed? Or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's the thing. If you do get to that, it's only going to happen probably, I don't know, and you guys can maybe give me the number too, but maybe 1 out of 20 times does somebody say, I don't really want to sign anything. Usually when that happens, there's a couple different ways to go. Either I haven't really built rapport yet and that we're still too much of a salesperson. We haven't connected yet. And that's usually what happens when it happens. But another way to handle that is there something that I didn't cover or something that's happened in the past that is causing you to not be comfortable signing this? Just to ask, because well, our last realtor screwed us, we lost our earnest money, but I'd rather know that now and address that. Or is there something that I haven't covered that would not make you comfortable working with me? And then it would come out, and this only happens 1 out of 20 times. Now, we just really like to review the fine print before we sign anything. At that point, if we built rapport and I've asked those questions and that's what it comes down to, I would still work with that person. I would leave that with them and say, in fact, here's a highlighter. I'm going to send this home with you tonight. Just read through it and highlight anything that you have questions about that I could explain further, and go ahead and take that. We'll get the search set up and start sending some stuff. And the next time we meet, we'll come back to this and address that. So I would probably in that case. Now, there is one caveat to having a master list, reconnecting with your database while they're the 98% that aren't moving. When you have a relationship-based business and people are calling you more often than you calling out to get them to come in for a consultation, if it's your friends and you're like, hey, just come in so we can get you set up to understand the process, that's what I'd have to say to database call in, that you might not even be signing a buyer's agency agreement on that. And I'm only saying that because you've got the relationship and they are not going to buy the house with somebody else because you've been their realtor for the last 5 years and they weren't buying. Does that make sense? So I can tell you, real world, if it's a database or a referral and you can tell just by how you're talking, they're committed to you. It's definitely something you want to cover. And this allows me to do this, and I'm going to still do that, but I'm not going to hold them to that. And I probably might not even be throwing that right in there. We might be doing the consultation over the phone mostly because we're that comfortable that I'm not going to make them come into the office for 10 or 20 minutes if they're a referral or they're a past client. However, that also reminds me, past clients, do not skip this process with past clients, because this has happened before, forgetting that they haven't bought a house for 5 to 10 years, or even if it was 3 years. Do you know how different the process is right now in our current market versus 3 years ago? And that by not bringing them in to refresh them on the process and how you work, it has come back to bite people to where, you know, they were thinking about buying or selling, so they drifted through a new construction home subdivision, and they signed in on the register, and they had a meeting with the builder over some different floor plans. You are out of the picture. You're out. So they don't know the process, and part of that consultation is explaining, you know, when we showed the map, no matter what house you see, no matter where it is, I don't care if it's a for sale by owner, I don't care if it's anything, you contact me first and I can get more information about that property. Because even if it's a for sale by owner and they contact me and I do my best to work myself in there to get the commission to sell the house and be representing them, I will tell them, say, if a for sale by owner really truly is 10% under market value, no commission, and you're not paying them the commission and all the other stuff, and that's really that good of a deal, I mean, I would be the first one to release you from any contract we have, but I won't be able to represent you or give you advice on it either. Does that make sense? So that also builds a little bit of trust with people too, that you're willing to do that, but that's why you want them to call you with every property first. New construction is the big one. You know, always take my stack of cards at this consultation. Here's my stack of cards. If you go through an open house, if you go through, because I just find people get caught up in the moment. Oh, look, honey, an open house. Send them with a stack of cards. Say, you always sign in my name, so you have the right to be represented. Even with those that haven't signed the agency agreement yet, here's my stack of cards. If you do happen to go through an open house or new construction subdivision, just put my name down so you have that right to be represented if you do end up doing anything there. It's another great script. And then the last thing I just wanted to make sure we covered a couple of things is that once you've got them working with you, be sure you give them the app, because it's tracking everything. Let them know that they can find out a lot of information about the neighborhoods just by circling the area around wherever they are. It's going to show them stats on what recent sales are. So you're getting part of what I use every single day right there in front of you. And what I would suggest is, if you don't know how to get somebody your app, then this is the time to go find out now. And it will take a little bit. Like, I was sitting there one day going, I don't even know where my app is. How do I even give somebody my app? So it took me like 20 or 30 minutes to find where I would actually even give somebody my app. So I sent it to myself as if I was a customer. And you might even send it to a couple of family members, because everybody's using different computers. They're using iPads, they're using cell phones, they're using Android versus Apple, all the different things that are out there. Send it to a few people. And if you're connected with your sphere, and you can say, hey, we've got a Keller Williams app, it's our real estate app, but I really need to know what it looks like when it comes into people. Can I send you my app and you download it, and let's see what it looks like, and see what it looks like on their phone next time you're with them too. So you can see if your names, if it's attached, have them fill in the form and see if it comes back to you. Remember, we talked about that in another one, Googling your name, filling out the forms on all the websites that you're showing up on, and is the lead even coming back to you? So you know what it looks like when a real buyer is using your app. You know what that thing looks like. So it took me a little while to pull this up, but I took a picture of it, and now it's part of our drip plan to say, this is what it'll look like when you get it from me, right? So, but that, yeah, that app is going to collect all their saved homes in there and all that other stuff. So you can see when they're actually using it. And you're actually being even more proactive about, hey, I see you saved a favorite house. Not that you have to do it all the time, but whenever that's happening, they're like, yeah, we liked it. Have you driven by it yet? No, haven't driven by it yet. It just looked really nice online. Just allows that extra communication. But again, in Command, once you get in there and figure all this stuff out, you can start customizing it and pulling in there what you want. I love that you said, just going off the what am I thinking? The content of the book is amazing. All right, anything else to add on any of that? All right, guys, I'm going to throw the survey in here. Any questions from anyone, or even ahas? I would love for everyone just to share something either in the chat or unmute, and just one thing that you picked up from today's class or session.
Don't forget about script practice Mondays and Fridays, 11 to 12.
Absolutely. Now, Delmetrius, I knew you said you picked up something. I'm going to use that, the scale of 1 to 10, right?
Scale of 1 to 10. I'm definitely going to use that.
Yep. Anyone else? Just one little thing that you picked up, or maybe like, aren't you a little more excited about buyer consultations now than before our session started? So what's making you excited? Anybody else want to share?
I also like eliminating houses and having just the top 3.
Yep. Top 3. Yep. Awesome pickup. If you haven't done any consultations yet, call your friends, start calling through your database and get connected with people so that you can say, hey, do you mind, like if you're going to have coffee with someone, it actually is a good reason to go have coffee. Can I meet with you and go through this process of buying a house, and I want your opinion on it? It's a great way to say, I'd love your opinion on this process and see what I'm missing or what I should add in there. And they'll be like, most of the time they'll get through it and go, that's awesome. You do that with every buyer? And all of a sudden you've now come top of mind. And if anybody's thinking about buying or selling, oh my gosh, you should call Brandy. She like takes you through the whole process and you understand it, right? All right, guys, anything else? Yeah.
Real quick, Brad, if anybody's out there that wants to run their buyer's presentation or wants to do anything, I put my contact in the chat. Give me a call, send me an email.
There you go. Grab that. Oh, click that link on the survey so it opens up in a new window. If you would fill that out, and just, we like to know if you're getting good stuff out of this. Like, do we want to bring this back again and more things like it? And if you like the instructor, I mean, if we got to find another instructor, we can do that too. All right, guys, have a great day. We'll see you on Friday.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your contribution, you guys. That was great.
Glad to be here, Brad. Thanks for